Namaste, everyone. Thank you all for attending the first ever webinar of the series Hinduism in the 21st Century. My name is Jannavi Ganesh, and I'm one of the coordinators for this webinar series. So Northeast Hindu Yuva is hosting this webinar series. So I'll quickly talk about Hindu Yuva. Hindu Yuva is a student-run socio-cultural organization which has presence in over 40 universities in the United States. Our aim is to preserve, practice, and promote Hindu Dharma. So as we must know, today is International Yoga Day, and the perfect complement for yoga is actually Ayurveda, which is our topic for today. So our series, or our first webinar today, is Food for the Soul, an Ayurvedic perspective on conscious eating. And our speaker is Nidhi ji. Thank you so much, Nidhi ji, for being here and being our speaker for the first ever webinar of the series.
Thank you so much, Janvi. It's such an honor.
So I'll quickly introduce our moderator for this evening. But before I do that, I wanted to mention that we will be taking questions from the audience, either through YouTube or Facebook throughout the discussion. So please send in your questions. So let me introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Pawan Bhat. So he recently graduated from Tulane University and majored in biochemistry and minored in public health. He is going to soon start his PhD at Vanderbilt University in cancer research. So as he has a background in the natural sciences, he began an interest in nutritional science as well. So he became an Ayurvedic enthusiast. Fun fact, he is also a vegan. So take it away, Pawan.
Namaste, everyone. Today, we at Hindu Yuva are excited and honored to have Nidhi Pandya as our esteemed guest this evening. So Nidhi is a third-generation Ayurveda practitioner and hails from New York. And to inform her practice, she directly consults the primary sources, the ancient Sanskrit scriptures. So therefore, her knowledge of Ayurveda has much breadth and scope. She is currently faculty at the Shakti School of Ayurveda and writes for India's most prestigious Ayurveda magazine, Ayurveda and Health Tourism. So after this session, please check out her website, nidhipandya.com, if you wish to learn more or if you'd like some personal coaching. You can also find her tips and advice on various social media platforms. So without further ado, welcome Nidhi ji, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor because Hinduism is a cause so close to my heart. It is truly an honor to be here. So thank you so much. And thank you for that kind introduction, Pawan.
Yeah, so to help us get acquainted, what has inspired you to learn, practice, and teach Ayurveda? So basically just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Right. So, I was, of course, raised in a family where Ayurveda was practiced as a way of living because my grandfather was an Ayurvedic practitioner and a healer. What I didn't understand is how much, and I grew up in Mumbai, I kind of took it for granted. I thought that's the only way people live. When I moved to the US about 16, 17 years ago, and I worked briefly for a pharmaceutical company, and then I realized how different, I also realized how different the lifestyle and food was here, diet. And I realized how health as well as disease was kind of looked at. It was actually a very big shock to me. And that's what made me say, made me go back to saying that this is what I want to bring here to the West, is this whole intuitive way of living, this great science that we hold from our Vedas. Like Ayurveda comes from the Vedas. So this great science that we hold from the Vedas, this needs to be brought in the world. I feel like the time was right, my place was right, and it all aligned together for me. And that's what really made me take a deep dive into this. At the same time, Pavanji, what I want to say is that, mental disorders are on the rise in developed economies, in developed countries. So-called, people think we understand health, which is another story. But at the same time, manasik vyadhis or mental disorders, or just the kind of stressful, anxiety-loaded lifestyles that we lead, it is such a big problem and has such a direct impact on the health. That was aligned. Psychology as well as understanding how human minds work was also a great interest of mine. And Ayurveda has tremendous unexplored scope in that science. So for everything, for all possible reasons, I felt like this was my right time to be here. I had an internal, passionate calling. And yeah, I've never looked back.
Great. So I actually have a question regarding mental health, but before we get there, assuming that some of our audience has never heard of Ayurveda, doesn't know a single thing about it, can you please just give us an overview of what Ayurveda is? And can you also address some common misconceptions that someone might come across?
Okay, great. So Ayurveda is basically, it is the manual of life. That's how I describe it the best. But Ayu means life and Veda means science. So it's the essential science of life. And what life means is not only human life, it's life in the universe. It's the understanding that we are a part of this universe and there is a very strong alignment that we have to find in our bodies, a fine-tuning within our bodies and a fine-tuning with the universe. And Ayurveda provides for tools to understand what is that balance, that homeostasis or the ecosystem we need to maintain in our bodies, in our minds, in the environment. And the kind of practices it recommends is a lot of it has to do with food, lifestyle, diet, and every other modality, whether it's psychology or psychotherapy, all of those are also a part of it. But basically, ahar, vihar, and aushadhi, food, lifestyle, and the kind of herbal medicines you can consume go a big part in determining your balance. The other thing about Ayurveda that I would like to mention is that it's built on 3 pillars, right? So I'm just giving you important concepts to begin with. And those 3 pillars to essential health are ahar, nidra, brahmacharya, which is food, sleep, and controlled use of your senses. So Ayurveda understands that there is an ecosystem. You have to find alignment. The tools are food, diet, lifestyle, and herbs. And these are the 3 things that you always need to go back to: ahar, nidra, brahmacharya, sleep, controlled use of senses, and the kind of food that you eat. So it is really, Pavanji, this is one science. I feel like the more I read, every day I'm learning more. At the same time, there is not a single answer that I have asked and I have not found in the Sahitas. There's just nothing. It is amazing that science, what the Western science is discovering today, breakthrough discoveries and breakthrough understanding exists in our Vedas, and not in code language. It exists precisely. Just to give you one example, which I found really amazing, is that we know in the last 50 years that women ovulate on the 12th day of their cycle. In Ayurvedic texts, this is exactly what's written. Dwadash Nisha, 12th night of their cycle is an ovulate. So this is a very subtle realization. The fact that the pituitary existed. It is a science that goes deeper and wider than any other science, if I have to put it simply. The common misconception, Pawanji, is that people think that Ayurveda is just about herbs. Unfortunately, when the Britishers came to India, they wanted to annihilate Ayurveda, right? They wanted to bring the whole allopathic medicine to our country. And when that happened, a lot of it was annihilated. We were not allowed to practice the way we were supposed to practice. So the only things that really survived was the herbal practice. So a lot of people think that Ayurveda means taking herbs, or they think Ayurveda means eating only Indian foods of a certain type. But Ayurveda is a timeless and it's a universal science. It's about principles that can be applied to anyone living anywhere on this planet, rather than specific practices or prescriptions. So that is, those are some of the most common misconceptions regarding Ayurveda.
Okay, thank you, Nidhi ji. So my next question is, so we often see traditional and holistic medicine touted only in preventative and palliative care, but then you mentioned how Ayurveda can be used to help with mental illness. And now there's actually a hot field of research where they found this mind-gut connection. So whatever you consume, the bacteria in your gut can communicate with biochemically with your brain, and can affect your moods, your emotions. So can you speak what practices in Ayurveda can help improve our mental health? But not just diet, but other practices as well.
Absolutely. But, before we go into that, can I take the liberty to kind of, step back a little bit, because I realize that there's one foundational concept that I want to talk about, because once I've spoken about that, when we answer any questions, we always have to go back to this foundational concept. So I'm going to talk about the two main principles that I work largely with in my practice. The first one is the understanding of the fact that the human body is a warm and moist place. That we are from within, warm and moist place. And I want to explain that a little further, right? When we say we want to have homeostasis, so Ayurveda also realizes that health means being in balance in a certain way. In the West, we've realized that homeostasis is the most essential function of the human body. In the West, unfortunately, it's through taking blood work and taking your pulse and your temperature and saying, if everything is within range, it means you're fine. You're not. The first thing you get sick is you go and get all of these tests done, see what your range is. Ayurveda understands that as a state where your tissues, where your doshas, where your elimination, where your digestive fire, everything is in a certain range. That range is warm and moist. And I want to go a little bit into this because it is probably the most important concept that exists. And when I say that, how do I know that, right? We are warm-blooded mammals. We know that we're warm-blooded. Our body is a warm place. Our blood is warm and moist. The mother's milk is warm and moist. Our digestive environment, which today they say the probiotic environment in the West, now they realize there is something called the probiotic environment. That is a good bacteria, good flora and fauna. Where can bacteria exist? In a warm and moist place. Bacteria will not exist in a desert, which is hot and dry. It will not exist in Alaska, which is cold and frigid. Good bacteria will exist in a warm and moist place. If it becomes hot and humid, now that bacteria has all kinds of viruses and diseases and mosquitoes. So that precise place of warm and moist. Florida in the month of March, where everything is blossoming and growing, warm and moist. Becomes summer, it damages. So back, right, mother's milk, our blood, our urine, when you exhale, it's warm and moist. When you have a conversation with somebody that you really resonate, you're like, that was a warm person. You'll never say that a person was a cold person. And if the person's a hot person, you have a different reaction. So as human beings, we constantly are attracted to this warm and moist. That is our homeostasis. That is our starting point. Now I'm going to address the fact that even our digestive environment has hot digestive enzymes, which is the warm. It has the mucosal lining. I want to explain mucosal lining is this phlegmy lining. It's like a lubrication in your gut, which today they know has a lot to do with immune cells, with the connection with your mind, etc. But I'm going to use the Ayurvedic understanding of it, right? It's the moisture. It's the moist. While your enzymes is the warmth, your mucosal lining is the moisture. It is the diya that burns with the ghee. If you have a flame, just heat, right? A matchstick will never burn like a diya. It'll burn out. It's not warm and moist. But a diya is warm and moist. And that is the environment of your gut. It's the environment of an oil lamp, of a ghee lamp, right? So now I want to go to emotions, right? Let's take, for example, any emotion you have has a guna, a property in Ayurveda. For example, anxiety is a drying emotion in the long term. So anxiety will lead to motion, right? When a thought stays in your body for a long time, right? When you say, I'm not going to put this thought into action, I'm not going to put it into surrender. Now it starts kind of moving. It's a rumination. And that movement in Ayurveda, movement is related to wind or vata. Wind is drying. So anxiety is drying. If you have anxiety, your gut will be a dry place. Now, instead of being warm and moist, it's become this dry, arid place. And instantly, that's what a disease connection is. If you're a very hot person again, right, there's heat in your mind. Heat, anger, has a hot guna, as a hot property. That again is going to have that same effect in your gut, where the heat is going to become so sharp that it's going to deplete the mucus. And now your own heat will burn your own insides because the mucosal lining, which protects the insides, is now burnt out. Similarly, depression, right? Depression, if you see people who have chronic depression, there's immobility at a physical and a mental level, right? Depression means I'm unable to get out of this situation. Immobility leads to stagnation. The guna is guru, heavy. So that builds mucus in your gut. And when that happens, the flame cannot burn strong. So basically, every thought has a property. Long story short, every thought has a property. That property, while I'm giving you the example of just your mucosal lining, even our nerves, and I want everyone to know this because it's very amazing. Our nerves, which is like an electrical wiring system, has insulation. You know, just how a phone has a wire, plastic wire protected. Our nerves have something called myelin sheath. That myelin sheath protects our nerves, keeps our signals, our nervous impulses at a regular pace. When these gunas come in, when dryness comes in, it's going to dry out the myelin sheath. When anger comes in, it's going to burn out the myelin sheath. So everything you have in your mind, every emotion, has a physical corresponding action. The other example is when we feel sad in our mind, sadness is a thought, but a tear is produced in the gland. That is the effect of the chemical reaction, right? So that is how strong our mind is. Now, how does Ayurveda address some of these emotions? So I will tell you that even ahar is also a big part of it. Food is also important. People who have a lot of dry foods, for example, automatically will run towards anxiety. I work with some models and actresses, and I see a lot of dry foods when you eat because your body has dried up, your nerves have dried up. Then there's anxiety because now your nervous impulses are not regulated. But one of the first things that we do in any kind of usually anxiety or anger related mental problems is something called abhyanga. Abhyanga, or self-oil massage on a daily basis, is one of the most regulating things for the nervous system, right? Which is before you go for a shower, before you do your exercise, is to, put, for most people it's sesame oil. but it can be different. If you have skin rashes, I would say don't just take that advice blindly. But for everybody else who's balanced, you put sesame oil, and then you can do a little exercise and then go for a bath. That's very grounding to your nervous system. Again, in your foods, you want to constantly go back into warmth and moisture. Eating warm foods, eating moist foods. The other thing is samvahan or counseling is also a big part of Ayurveda. Unfortunately, Pawanji, in our country, counseling or therapy has become a stigma. But I do want to mention here that it is called samvahan, which is comforting, is a part of our treatment. In fact, the first documented session of psychotherapy was documented as the Bhagavad Gita. The conversation between Arjun and Krishna Bhagwan was essentially a psychotherapy session. And it has changed the way our world is today, that one text, right? So that is also a part, like our shastras, our scriptures encourage all of that you can follow any modality. Sometimes you need to put the person to sleep, depending on what is going on. But if you're starting from a point of no understanding, I would say abhyanga. I would say make your foods warm and moist. These are the two things that you constantly want to do. And of course, sleep. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but I had to give a background before I got into it.
Right. No, I think all of my following questions will be invalid. I'm just going to tell everyone to follow warm and moist now. But no, that was good. Thank you. So on this subject of having this warm and moist environment, have you seen any modern studies, any recent studies in the medical field that are providing evidence in favor of this observation?
So I will tell you, Pawanji, like I am the wrong person to ask that question even, because I find, this may sound Ayurvedic arrogance, but I do find some of the modern research very partial, limited, and basic. I feel like unless it has been around for 25, 30, 50 years, unless they have not only conducted the research, but really followed through. And you know what the funny part is? Every time I have gone back into research, and any research that's held through the test of time is already existed in our own scriptures, right? I mean, imagine the concept of the probiotic environment is such a game changer. It is exactly this whole logical understanding of that warmth and moisture, right? When your doctors will tell you that, hey, have kefir or have macrobiotics foods, right? What is kefir, macrobiotic foods, yogurts, for everybody who's listening, kombucha? These are fermented foods. How does something ferment? It needs two elements, heat and moisture, right? And Bavaji, my whole goal is to bring us back to intuition. If I have to open a research report each time, look, it's important as practitioners. It'll be important for people like you and me. But for the layman, right? If they have to have the fear that unless it's proven, on a daily basis, it's not done. That is non-intuitive. We eat 2, 3, 4. Some people eat 7 times a day. Eating is life. It's basically what we do every day. If we have to, it becomes a whole non-intuitive process by constantly trying to get validation. But the more we come back to this understanding, to a natural understanding of what's going on, the closer we exist in nature, the closer we are to ourselves. And, even though it's not research, I do want to say that I'm talking about my Dadaji. He's not my Dadaji. He's my husband's Dadaji, who was also a president of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. And I want to say he's 98 years old. Now, this for me is like a testimony, and it's recent. His entire family was infected with COVID, right? So everybody, 9 people in his household. He's 98 years old. He's a man who's never given up this lifestyle, right? He's always followed this lifestyle for 98 years. Lived in Mumbai, which is a very tropical place. People get sick much easier. He didn't get COVID. Everybody around him had COVID. His helper who helps him had COVID. He's not gotten a fever at 60 plus years, right? I mean, this is the evidence of this lifestyle. I mean, to me, there's not a big testimony. There couldn't be a bigger testimony. And we've seen this in India, we've seen this with our sages, we've seen this with our yogis, and they really, if you examine and study their food and what they cultivated, whether it was through pranayam, were these gunas. Like even gratitude, compassion is warm and moist. If you have to put a temperature and a feeling, a sensation on compassion, you would say it's warm and moist.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm more convinced about not just blindly looking into the research and looking within myself and into our scriptures so that I can gain that intuition. So moving on to just shifting gears a little bit. So what kind of practices are relevant that we can have in our daily lives? Like what is one simple habit that all of us can start doing as early as tomorrow?
Okay. So again, I'm going to go back. I always go back to cultivating intuition and tapping into that. And I'll tell you why that is important, of course. Right? I mean, that's how our Vedas were also written. It was written from the deep understanding, right? We understand everything on an external sensory level, and that internal chintan that is required, that kind of dhyan and chintan, meditative process is really what makes us internalize everything that we learn. So it's very important to keep going back into it. So the one thing that I'm going to ask you to use in your day, I'm going to give you a principle and a practice. Okay, is that okay? I'll give you two things, principle and a practice. So in terms of principle, I'll say that align with the clock of the universe. We are diurnal mammals, right? Which means we are not bats. We are not owls. We wake up with the sun and we sleep with the sun. Our body mimics the earth, because all diurnal mammals do. So morning time, the earth is wet and sluggish. There is dew. It's just waking up. Your body is wet and sluggish. How do we know that? Sometimes we have congestion in the morning. Sometimes we have eye boogers. If anybody who practices yoga knows that their joints are much more sluggish, we feel sluggish in bed. It's a good time to get your body moving, exercise, vyayam, as well as have a warm breakfast. So in the US, that is a big mishap that happens. Everybody eats. To me, that's blasphemy. Having cold breakfast, cold milk, cold smoothies, cold everything. Morning, it's wet and sluggish. You need warm breakfast. You need to get up, bring your Agni up. Just let it wake up. Otherwise, you're like putting more warm and more, you're putting something colder in a wet and sluggish environment, right? So warm breakfast. Lunch is when the sun is at its peak. It's also when your mind is the sharpest and your hunger is the sharpest. Eat your biggest meal at lunch, not breakfast. Lunch is the biggest meal because your Agni is the sharpest during lunch. By 4, 5 o'clock, it's windy. It's wind outside. Your body is also feeling windy. That's why you get like by everybody's stretching. Everybody's getting the wind out by 4, 5, right? Because it's that time of the day. That is the time you can have tulsi tea, peppermint tea, something to wake you up. I recommend herbal. And we need very little dinner. Unless you're doing a lot of exercise, you're working on a farm, you're playing a sport, dinner time, you need very, very little dinner. You need lentils, a little bit of veggies. So dal, veggies, a little bit of rice is enough. So by following this principle, you align your clock. What I see, Pawanji's people tell me in 2 weeks of doing this, suddenly people who are constipated, not having bowel movements, now suddenly they're going at the right time. They're like, what happened? All they did is they said, instead of working against the tide, we have these special, let's just say there's special workers who come out and say, it's morning time, I'm here now. How can I help you? But we say, I'm going to do something completely different in the morning. I'm going to sleep when you come out. Or lunchtime, the workers say, the Agni says, I'm ready and I'm active. And you say, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to eat a salad for lunch. I'm not going to eat a heavy lunch. So we are flowing against the tide. And of course, sleeping at 10 o'clock is also great because it's the time of your day. Your body does internal repair. While today they understand it's melatonin time, Ayurveda also said it's Pittakal of the night, which is between 10 and 2. Cellular metabolism repair happens, and it's a great time to be in bed. So support your body by listening to its internal clock, by aligning that with that of the universe. That is the one principle that I told you. And of course, you can base your practices on this principle. But if I have to ask you to do one practice, which I think goes a really long way, I would say tongue scraping. Ayurveda has a lot of practices in the Dinacharya, but scraping your tongue after brushing your teeth is such an easy 30-second practice but it gives you the biggest bang for your buck, because when you stimulate your tongue, so when you clean it, firstly, you eliminate toxins. As you digest and stuff goes down, stuff also crawls up a little bit and kind of makes a residue on your tongue. So you get that out, you tone your tongue, but you also stimulate your tongue. You say, wake up tongue, my day has begun. And now those good digestive enzymes can start kind of, coming up a little bit, because every time you touch your tongue, your digestive system gets a signal. And that's what you're essentially doing when you're scraping your tongue. You're just kind of activating that.
Okay, that's great, Nidhi ji. Thank you. So would this routine be the same no matter where you are? Or does it differ for, like, say, a cowboy in Texas or a Yankee from up north? Would there be like different practices in the daily routine?
So I would say the practices are similar, but if you are in a place which is, let's say now I'm going to use my example again, which is hot and dry, then you need more moisturizing practices and cooling practices, right? So wherever you are on the spectrum, so tongue scraping, everybody can do, but wherever in terms of going one level deeper. So this kind of timetable of the day for everybody, as long as you're on planet Earth, for tongue scraping, everybody can do. But if you want to go deeper and say, how do I customize this further for myself, depending on what your body is. So we say what your body avastha is. From warm and moist, has it become hot? Like, do you have ulcerative colitis? Has it become cold and sluggish? Do I have candida or yeast infections? Where have you gone in that spectrum? So you can come back by doing it. If you're drier, you need more moisturizing practices. If you're more moist and clammy, you need a little bit more drying practices, which is rarely the case, but more like warming practices. So you have to customize it, what your body avastha is or what your body state is. At the same time, where do you live? If you're living on a desert, like a cowboy in a very hot, muddy place, you want to do more abhyanga, you want to eat moister foods, all of those things. That is the level of customization. But you can very well live in Japan, you can live in Timbuktu, you can live anywhere in the world and practice Ayurveda by following these simple principles, by not feeling that you always have to go and get turmeric and you have to get trifla and you have to get all of these things. You can practice it where you are with what you have to attain and keep balance.
Okay, thank you, Nidhi ji. So just a brief aside to those of you who are watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, please keep submitting your questions. I'll start sending questions over to Nidhi ji. So actually, one of our questions, is there any specific Ayurvedic practices that is effective for weight loss?
So the first thing I want to talk about weight loss is this, right? Our body has essentially 3 phases, okay, and 3 functions. There is a building phase, which happens from 0 to the time that we are a little bit, to our youth, right? That is a building phase. We're building. Suddenly we become from little babies, we become this big human. That's also called the kapha phase of life, but you can keep that out if that's too confusing. Then there's a transformation phase. Suddenly we become, we have all these hot hormones, we become young adolescents. We have this whole drive to transform. We create in our work environment, we just create. That's the pitta phase of life. The last phase is when it's a decline, movement and decline phase. And in that decline phase, what happens essentially, everything is drying up, everything is cooling down, and you're moving towards your demise. When extreme weight loss, Pawanji, is going faster to the decline phase, going further away from the building phase, we need balanced building, transformation, and depletion. When we want to deplete at a rate faster than we are building, you are moving towards your decline. It's depletion of your body's dhatus, it's depletion of your tissues, and it's one of the most dangerous things that we can do is to go beyond a certain weight for our bodies. Because your mucus lining will dry, your collagen will dry, the myelin sheath on your nerves will dry, all your matter in your brain is going to dry, you're going to become this arid person, and dementia, Parkinson's, all of those things set in because your body now is really prematurely dried up, right? However, there is room for people to lose weight. If you have put on weight in a manner which is not optimum, is in an unhealthy way, the two things you want to do is boost up your Agni and do intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting or Langhan is a part of Ayurveda. For somebody who genuinely has excess weight, the first thing you want to do is eat before 5 o'clock. You can't do 5, eat before 6 o'clock. Have a very light dinner. This practice alone can give a big difference. The second thing you want to do is not have cold water. Again, warm and moist. So you want to have warm water through the day. Warm water is a big indicator for weight loss. Boil and then you can cool it a little bit. Right? That really goes a long way again for this kind of a thing. And will also go and support your Agni. Don't just go gulping down water when it's hot. It should be that you can't gulp it down. It should be that temperature, sipping temperature rather than gulping temperature. That's the second thing. And the third thing is you want to build your Agni. Now, don't go and eat a lot of heating foods because that's like a matchstick. Agni is like a diya, moist as well as warm. So use a lot of spices in your food. Use cinnamon stick. You don't have a good spice is not what is spicy on your tongue. A good spice is something that's called a spice, but is not spicy. Right? It's not super spicy on your tongue. It can be like cloves, it can be cardamom, it can be cumin, jeera, it can be whatever, all our Indian spices that we use, including turmeric. Use them with your foods as much as you can. If you want to drink hot water and add one spice, the only one spice I would recommend very easily is a pinch of dried ginger, not fresh, dried ginger, or even include tea bags, chamomile tea bag, not black tea, green tea, white tea, chamomile tea bags, or any other tea, even peppermint tea, tulsi tea, whatever you can start including them. But achieve your weight loss through this. Vyayam is also a part of it's indicated as a daily practice for somebody who's not depleted. So exercise is a part of our shastras as well. It's very, very important to keep your body moving. It's not alone to do it with diet. But I would say if you try these things, naturally you'll see that your body will come and settle at its optimum weight.
Okay, so relatedly, I just recalled that one of the dieting fads today is the keto diet. So would you say that's kind of like a matchstick instead of, like a slow burning diya, having the keto diet as a form of weight loss?
It is definitely not a very balanced diet, right? Any kind of that kind of deprivation also, if I'm not mistaken, keto diet has a lot of proteins, right, Pawanji?
No carbs whatsoever.
No carbs, yeah, no carbs, yeah. So definitely, I would say more than anything, it's just consuming just earthy foods, very, very earthy foods. It's not very balanced. Those are they can be very heating in our system, right? We need good grains. Good grains, like even rice, has a very moist. It's a very good effect in your body. It's cooling, but it's not cold, right? So we are having in a meal, you have something that's cooling, you have something that's warming, you have something that's earth, you have something that's water, you have something that's fire. We put all our elements in our plate when you have a balanced diet. The concept of Shad Rasa or 6 tastes or the balanced food, they all have a very, very specific divine purpose. They all come together very beautifully. So eliminating any of those, as well as going on any kind of diet, because your body goes through a shock treatment every time you give it a completely new, like a completely new situation. Every time your body faces a foreign practice, a foreigner, a foreign intake through your senses, a foreign substance, your body has a little period where it goes off homeostasis, and then it needs to really work hard to come back into homeostasis. The more we keep putting our body through all of these fad diets and these shock treatments, one day our body says, I'm done with you. I'm not adapting to you anymore. I've done this enough and I'm good now.
Okay, thank you. So many of us are transitioning to plant-based diets and eliminating dairy altogether, but we've been taught since time immemorial that foods such as milk and ghee are beneficial to our health. So for the people who are vegans out there, myself included, is Ayurveda still applicable to these times? And more importantly, what alternatives to dairy can vegans consume?
Right. So Ayurveda is timeless. Yes, ghee or ghruta is a highly recommended food. It's very close to life. It's very jivanya. It's very close to ojas, which is your essential life force, which keeps us ticking. However, I always say, right, there is a journey of this body and there is a journey of the soul. Right? The journey of the body will last you this lifetime. The journey of the soul, as you are undertaking with your veganism, because there is a stronger cause, will last you many lifetimes, right? And you know what? There might be some effects that you might feel that you've experienced, but it's something that you're willing to have, and you've taken that faith into consideration that this is very, very important to me. It's very dear to me. That being said, how are you going to replace the moisture in your food? Now, a lot of times what happens, people go vegan and they just go into raw foods, a lot of excessive raw foods, a lot of breads, right? Especially people who go from being non-vegetarian to vegan suddenly, it's all bread and it's all raw food. Very, very disturbing for their gut environment, right? All that bread is really going to soak all that mucus lining, get clogged inside. The raw food is going to rob the heat, because raw food is like putting leaves in a bonfire, which kind of settles the heat down. So to do that, it consumes a lot of heat. Raw foods consume a lot of heat. I'll say make sure everything is cooked, have enough almonds, have enough, whether you're having avocado oil, you're having coconut oil, you're having avocados, sweet potatoes. Ask yourself moist foods, moist foods, moist foods. And in those moist foods, you always want to put warm spices. So whether you're using black pepper, whether you're using cinnamon, whether you're using cumin, turmeric, these are the two principles. Everything you eat, warm and moist, and you're good. But the foods that I really recommend are, soaked and peeled almonds. I really recommend sweet potatoes, coconut oil if your body can digest it. I recommend these foods.
Yeah, my father makes it a point to give me soaked and peeled almonds every day for breakfast. So now I know why.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
then you'll be good. And one more thing I want to say, because it's so important. I want to say, if you've gone on this path, and even if you've not gone on this path, doing alternate nostril breathing or anulom vilom or nari shodhan pranayam, it's all the same, is very balancing to those energies in your body. So that's something that you want to do anyways. It's like a temperature, it's a thermostat, it's a regulation of coming back to that place in your body.
Yeah, so similarly with people shifting towards alternative kinds of food, not just dairy, but I've seen that people don't consume as much rice because it's been said in research that rice contains arsenic. So they're transitioning to other types of grains, such as like quinoa or couscous. So is this something you would recommend? And what is the Ayurvedic perspective on this recent trend?
So, I say every time there is a superfood, right, out there in the world, you want to examine, where is this coming from? Is the climate in that place similar to the climate where I live? Is there a food out there that is similar to the food that I consume here, that I can compare? For example, tulsi and basil are same family, right? So you can say it's something that my body is used to. So you have to ask, you also want to ask, what is the kind of work that those people do? Now, with quinoa, Peruvians, if you've ever seen them, they're very earthy people. They look very earthy. They live on mountains. They're climbing mountains, right? They're very they're full of earth. They're very well built. And they eat that food. When you're living in a region which you don't have that level of activity and you want to eat their food, you want to really ask yourself, does it match up? At the same time, how are they cooking their food? I've been to Peru. They eat quinoa is not like this much quinoa. It's one fistful of quinoa, which they cook in a lot of fat, like a gruel. It's like a broth soup. And that fat is required to break the quinoa down. We think fat is going to add things. When you're cooking something in fat, it's very important. If you cook your vegetables, you cook your sabzi without fat, without oil, without the tadka, it's not going to cook as well. It's going to burn. Similarly, quinoa, it has so much earth that it requires that moisture. It requires that water for it to really become a balanced food. And then you consume it. I am completely not a no fan of picking a food, breaking it down in a laboratory and say, this is high protein, so I'm going to dump my body with it because I want high protein. So a very careful examination of all of these different factors is required. Ayurveda does believe in satmiyata, which means you are used to what you're used to. So if you're used to certain foods, your body is used to it. It's learned how to break it down. It carries genetic memory. So your ethnic foods are always good for you. That being said, if you want to transition to a new food, Ayurveda gives a formula, a numerical formula. It's amazing. It has a numerical formula. How do you go from consuming a food that you're not used to? How do you start consuming it? You have a small portion, then after 2 days, you increase that by this much. So it's a numerical formula. It's a gradual introduction. But even in the gradual introduction, you have to examine your food. You cannot pick something which is a superfood tofu in Japan and say that I will be able to metabolize it the same way.
Yeah,
and for rice eaters, I do want to say that the right Ayurveda prescribes not basmati rice, which I think in the US has completely blown up, saying that, basmati rice is Ayurvedic. It's not. The kind of rice you want to eat is either amba more or sona masuri or surti kollam, short grain rice, always aged, kept in dark silos, in jute bags where the excess moisture is absorbed.
Okay, yeah, because I remember when I moved to college for the first time and had to eat in the dining halls, and I was exposed to only like burgers and pizza and not the traditional Indian food that I grew up with. My body felt very confused, and now I know why. So thanks for letting us know.
Yeah. A little confusion is okay when you're going to college, but now that, not to keep it confused for long.
Right. So, so we all know that America has a workaholic culture, right? And to keep energy levels high, we adore this little chemical known as caffeine. So, what's your stance on beverages like coffee and tea? And are there any chemical-free alternatives that can help us get through the energy slump in the day?
Absolutely. So I will tell you that firstly, disclaimer is, while my job is to give you information on all of that, I think pick small changes for yourself. By listening to one talk, I don't want anyone to wake up and say, tomorrow I'm going to live this crazy lifestyle and not be able to sustain it, right? We all pick our indulgences. I will drink my chai once in a while. I will do that, right? But it's still my duty to give you the information from what I understand. So I'll give you the information. Doesn't mean I'm trying to scare you off. So the nature of caffeine is such, right? And that's why I started giving the whole warm and moist premise in the beginning, because everything goes back to that. For example, coffee is like a hot nuclear blast in your system. So it goes in your system, heats you up completely. So your nerves become so sharp, right? So everything is sharpened up. And that's what you experience. A lot of people even go to the toilet with that nuclear blast, right, when you have coffee. And then what happens after a blast? There's wind. It completely settles down, right? There's all this wind. And then after, people get that second need for the same coffee, right? That is how caffeine functions in your body, by setting it on fire temporarily, which is not warm and moist. So how am I going to bring warm and moist into it, right? It's hot, but not moist. Putting milk in the coffee, not drinking black coffee, putting a pod of cardamom in the coffee, at least trying to drink it at a time of day, like not between 10 and 2 when the sun is at its peak. If 4 o'clock, if you require a little cup, that's fine. Don't put a nuclear blast in your system in the morning if you can avoid it. Wait till 4 o'clock. What is the natural way of getting over that energy slump? Firstly, your body is not meant to be a machine. So, of course, honor it. That being said, yes, sometimes we all have those lifestyles where we can't. The few things that you can do is definitely doing pranayam regularly. It's a game changer for your energy levels. While you can't do things like Kapalbhati in the middle of the day with a full stomach, you can have a practice in the morning, and that goes a long time in the day. But if you feel a lull in the day, having something like tulsi tea, peppermint tea, doing a few rounds of Anulom Vilom, going and getting some fresh air and sunlight, which is also an Ayurvedic recommendation. It's called Atap and Anila. Getting sunlight and fresh air wakes up your nerves again, creates that kind of stimulation that you require. Doing that, as well as every night, putting a little bit of oil in your ears, head, and feet to reset your nervous system. What you do at night to restore goes a long way in how you function in the day. Most of the time, a lull we experience from the day, yes, it has to do with overworking, but it also has to do with the quality of repair that your body is maintaining. How quickly are you depreciating? If you're depreciating the whole day, right? We're depreciating the whole day. We're not resting. So when you're depreciating the whole day, at night, you want to repair. So that is my biggest recommendation. Repair at night, have a pranayama practice, and when you need, if you need a little bit more, tulsi tea, peppermint tea are my alternatives to caffeine.
Yeah, so you just mentioned sleep, and that makes me curious. So what's your sleep routine? How many hours of sleep do you get a night? What temperature do you sleep at? What position do you sleep at? Do you have a routine before going to bed that you follow? I'd like to know more about that.
Right. So I am last night was a funny night for me. I'm usually a really good sleeper, but I'm a trained sleeper. Some point in my, so I don't have a big routine because I sleep really, really well, but I do help people with a routine, right? And the way at least I was able to train myself is growing up, actually, believe it or not, I was a girl because I think I was such a thinker. I always had bloating. Anxiety led to dryness, led to wind, and I always had bloating in my stomach. So at night, I would be sitting with a hot water bag. So I was not a good sleeper as a child. In my teenage years, I trained my body to sleep really deep through the observation of breath, right? So this was this whole thing. You know, I mean, I can't take credit for it, but my mom always would say that to me. So the minute I would hit the bed, my mind goes on the bed, on the breath. What this does, it puts your body in something called the parasympathetic mode, which is, of course, a deeper mode where nervous system is more relaxed and is able to go to sleep. Anyways, what I do recommend to people is, of course, sleep before 10 p.m. Have at least 1 hour in the day of active physical work beyond your desk job. Wash your feet, oil your feet. If you have a sleep problem, oiling the bottom of your feet and wearing socks if it's not too hot is very important. And what that does, right? All our nerve endings are in that feet. When you oil it, right, what you do is you ground. According to Ayurveda, you pull all that vata, all that nervous energy down, and you allow it to ground and settle. So you wash your feet, you oil it, and you wear socks, cooling the room a little bit, but wearing a heavier blanket. Automatically, you want to do everything that's building. If people understand the doshas, everything that's against vata, but more closer to the building aspect of it, more kapha aspect of it, which is using heavier blankets, even if you need to make your room a little bit cooler. And I mean, of course, there's plenty of other things you can do, which we all know: keeping away from your screens, drinking chamomile tea, lowering the lights, which is actually very important as well. There's plenty of things that you can do to sleep well. And Ayurveda has amazing techniques, but this oil massage is one of my favorites. And sleeping before 10 is a great idea.
So you just mentioned doshas, and I don't think people know what that means. So would you kindly please explain what those are?
So doshas are a rage in the West. That's my simplest definition. But of course, I'm not going to leave you with that. So doshas in the West, and I know a lot of people probably have heard that. If you're hearing an Ayurveda talk, you may have heard the concept of doshas, which is that, hey, your body is of a particular unique type and it likes to do unique things. And once you know that unique things, now you know what, then we can give you a chart of what to eat. To me, that's a very non-intuitive way of explaining doshas. To me, this is how I explain doshas, which I've understood doshas, rather, I should say, that all our bodies have 3 tendencies: building, transformation, and like I said earlier, movement and decline. That building tendency, which we have so much of in childhood, is called a kapha tendency, which means building, nourishing, the transformation, which is generally everywhere in the universe led by heat, is called, the transformation tendency is called a pitta tendency. And the movement and decline, it's like a hair dryer, a cold hair dryer, which allows substances to move, but also is depleting, is called a vata tendency. So we all, our body, all the time, right? Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, it's always creation, transformation, and depletion. Sometimes, or pretty much all the time, we could have a stronger tendency to either do one of these three or two of these three. And that people have understood as doshas today in the West. That, hey, when somebody says, I'm a kapha dosha, it means my body likes to build more, it likes to nourish more, it likes to hold more, anything that's closer to kind of preserving life and building life. And you can overdo that function. So I'm putting on more weight than other people. I'm moving less because building is more grounding and steady. So of course, it's a much more complicated explanation. It's longer. I'm giving you a brief version. If you have a transformation or a pitta tendency, which means you have a lot of heat, your body is always transforming. You go into the sun, you get sunburned. You hear a little piece of information, you can get angry. You eat chili and your stomach is on fire. You know, anything your body likes to transform faster and sharper. Movement and decline, you're thinking more, you're falling more, you're moving more, you're drying more. So it's that vata tendency. So it's a very interesting subject, but I would say it's a deep subject. If you go and read up on doshas, the first thing they'll give you is a quiz, which I'll say don't take. Rather understand what doshas are, really tune into your own body and see that what is my body's tendency? You know, what does it like to do? Does it like to build? Does it like to transform? Is it like this whole moving and depleting kind of body?
Okay, thank you. So we're getting a lot of questions actually about how to balance sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. So first of all, what are these three qualities, and how can we balance these in our diet and our daily practices?
Okay. Now, you know, I can explain it the Vedic way, but I'm going to try and put a little bit of science into this, right? Again, I'm going to go into our nerves. So these are essentially qualities of our mind. So I'm going to use the explanation of your nervous system and imagining that your nerves, right? So when you're sattvic, your nerves, your nervous system is again this kind of saumya place, this moist place where subtle energies can flow. There is no blockages. Subtle energies can flow. You can stay very connected with yourself. You can go into deeper states of meditation. How is that supported? That is supported by a life where you eat these kinds of moist foods. They're always warm because your body is a warm place, but nothing that's going to be hot, nothing that's going to be cold or slow you down or block you. So which means, you know, your normal dal, sabzis, your green vegetables, non-spicy foods, you can have them spiced, but non-spicy foods. Even in your interactions, right? Not hot interactions, not sluggish, let's watch Netflix for 30 hours, that experience. All your experiences are also going to be at that pace, that medium pace, which has flow, but not speed. Right? And of course, there are many, many practices that you can do. A simple yogic pranayam routine, discipline, life allows for that kind of flow in your nervous system. So your whole yam, niyam, discipline, what do's, don'ts, and doing your yoga, asana, pranayama, living that life of these kind of warm, moist foods, and in your mental consumption and interactions, that allows for energy in your nervous system to flow in the right way. And when you do that, you automatically connect in a very deep state with yourself. Your body is never in an emergency mode. And it's always conducive to self-discovery in that sattvic mindset. Also, onion and garlic are heating, and you're not doing anything heating. You're doing everything moist and just warm. So onion and garlic are also not recommended because they set your nervous system on fire. It is a great path for somebody who's seeking spiritually, for somebody who says, I'm going to focus much more on dharma and moksha in the 4 pillars of life. That is a great kind of lifestyle to follow. Rajasic lifestyle, or what is Rajasic the Rajasic concept, which is very often looked down upon, but it does have its place at certain point in our life, right? If you're very engaged in the world, you have a household, you need a little bit of that Rajasic quality. And what is that Rajasic quality? Is now your nervous system has become a little bit hotter than that warm and moist. You're more engaged, you're more wired, you can think more, you're processing more, you're sharper. And of course, this can tip you off into an imbalance of excess heat, excess hunger, desire, greed, all of those hot qualities which makes you want to engage in the world more, right? So it keeps you more engaged in the world, keeps you engaged sharply in the world. In terms of food, anything with that kind of heating quality, again, the transformation quality, it's very closely linked to Pitta, but I'm not going to confuse you all with that. But that heating quality, so very spicy foods, fried foods, junk foods, all of that keeps you very engaged and sharp. Not the kind of junk food like cheesecake, which puts you to sleep, which brings me to my third guna, which is tamasic guna. Tamasic slows you down, slows down your nervous system, makes you hold emotions, makes you hold old memories which are not serving you, makes you hoard. Tamasic is a state of inaction. Rajasic is a state of a lot of action in the world. Sattvic is an introspection, and tamasic is inaction. Now your nervous system is so loaded with inertia, with old memories, with just the world is a bad place, I don't want to do this. And that will show in all your interactions, which will be animosity, resentment, deep kind of hatred. It'll show an inaction. In terms of food, I would say really stale foods, really cold foods, like a lot of cheesecake, a lot of cold smoothies, a lot of ice cream, excess sleeping in the day, all of that, which leads to I'm not going to move when I need to move. That is going to create that tamasic mindset. It's going to create inaction. There is no place for a tamasic mindset. It's a very dense mindset. Spiritual, moksha is a very light place. Tamas is a very dark, heavy place. So one is white and light, one is dark and heavy. And tamasic does not serve anybody. No schedules, no routines. That's something that we definitely want to get out of by moving more towards sattvic foods.
So would you recommend for someone who does have a busy work life, wants to improve their productivity and their output in the workplace, would you recommend more foods with Rajasic quality, or should we stick more to sattvic foods?
I think even if you have Rajasic foods, right? So if you're putting that fire in, that heating in, you support it with fuel, because if you don't, it will burn you out. So let's say that we feel like temporarily I need something to sharpen me up. Like the same thing. People go for coffee. That's very Rajasic. But I would say do something that's going to, the fuel without the fire is going to only burn people out. There is something called parinama, which is depreciation. How much do you engage in the world? How many breaths do you take? It's calculated, they say, the number of breaths you take. The more engaged you are, the yogi can hold and slow down his breath, because he knows that his number of breaths are calculated. The more engaged you are in the world, the faster you're breathing. You're, having these palpitations and shortness of breath. You're depreciating. So we fool ourselves that, oh, the faster I go, the further I go. The faster you go, the sooner you stop. So I would recommend that you do it, but you do it within reason. And the reason why I gave the disclaimer of the Rajasic food not being so bad is because what happens sometimes, a lot of complacency comes. If you're a householder, you're in your grihast ashram, you're in that phase of life where you need to provide for your family. You cannot go in a spiritual path fully 100% without enjoying dharma, artha, kam, moksha. Even if it's for a brief period, to understand what the world is about, to engage in the world is a part of our journey. So it's important.
Okay, thank you for that. So one of our last questions, actually, so regarding COVID-19, and I'm sure this is on everyone's mind, what are some practices that you recommend so that we're all in the best shape to fight a respiratory tract disease? And if you don't mind, do you have any success stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, I definitely have worked with COVID patients. I've also worked with some prevention, and I'd say mostly if you have to come back to this kind of lifestyle of the warm and moist and following the clock of the day. But otherwise, understand that of course this is the disease of the respiratory region of your respiratory system, and you want to protect this system. I will give you just few simple practices. There is something called nasya. If you can get your hands on a nasya oil, putting 1 drop in both nostrils every day really does this decongestion. If you want to do more practices, you can take hot water, do salt and turmeric, and do a throat gargle. Not consuming cold, sipping warm water, basically not letting phlegm accumulate. The more phlegm that accumulates here, or the more, even the more dry this whole region becomes, either dry or too sticky. Again, coming back to that warm and moist, where you can go back to, you'll see this everywhere in the universe. You'll see it everywhere, the warm and moist principle. So you want to keep it warm and moist so things can keep flowing, things can keep doing what they're doing, what they need to do, and just follow all of these principles. If anybody can get their hands on something called shamshamni vati or even guduchi, that's one herb that I will say it's worth taking for 10 days at a time. The Ayurvedic name is shamshamni vati of the pill. It does have some bhasmas, which is not which I cannot prescribe to anybody, but this is just a recommendation. And then you can take a couple of those for 10 days. So 2 tablets for 10 days or guduchi tablet for 10 days. These are just practices. But you can even do these practices where you don't come back to the principles that won't help. And steam. So gargle, nasya, steam, drinking warm water, sleeping well, eating warm, moist. I think we should be good. And success stories is just this, that, this is a protocol that I've followed, Pawan, as well as there is a fever protocol that I always follow, depending on what the fever is. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing that results are really, really good. They are just, we always come back to equilibrium. Instead of saying, what is this disease? Well, how do I fight it? We say, where have I gone off the warm and moist? Let me come back to it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very reassuring for all of us, especially since this time we're all nervous about contracting the disease, and now we know how to work towards preventing it. So thank you so much for that information.
And faith, yeah, I definitely just want to mention, having faith, again, your mind, faith is a warm and moist emotion. Keep that faith going. Your immunity will really stay high because you'll stay in equilibrium. Stress will have cortisol release, which will really bring you down immunity anyways. So you want to have faith in what you do.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're nearing the end of our session here. So Nidhi ji, if you have any takeaways or some few last words of wisdom, please go ahead and share.
I think I have harped enough about warm and moist. So if I say it one more time, somebody is going to be like, you can't say this anymore. So that, honor the clock of the universe, have faith, cultivate those same things, I would say, in our emotional health by introspection. In Ayurveda, all the answers, in our Vedic sciences, in Hinduism, in our Shastras, all the answers lie within us. All we need to do is ask the question, present the question deep in our psyche, sit with it. And I think everything that we have, we are so lucky to be a part of this culture. I think we should be grateful forever. And I'm glad that there is an organization like that protects our culture. It's just really, really fortunate. And I just think we should remember that and keep going back into that great knowledge which exists within us.
Okay, thank you so much, Nidhi ji. Janvi, would you like to say something?
Of course. Thank you so much, Nidhi ji. That was so informative. The audience actually had an overwhelming amount of questions. So everyone was deeply interested in this topic. So thank you for really inciting that interest in Ayurveda. Like, I definitely have a lot to read up on. So all of our Hindu Yuva chapters definitely want to thank you for being here, and the audience members as well for joining in on our first very webinar series of the 8. So I'll just quickly introduce the second webinar. So we're going to have Rukmini Vijaykumar talk about the different Hindu art forms. So the webinar is going to be Let the Music Speak, a modern reawakening of the Hindu classics. So please do join. It's going to be next Sunday at 8:30 p.m., same time, same place. So yeah, so thank you so much, Nidhi ji. Again, that was amazing.
It was an honor.
My mind is